Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for True Detective Season 3, Episode 5. Alright, so I found this episode to be almost just as good as last week, so I think it's just like a small margin worse than last week's episode, but last week's episode I loved. I thought it was the best episode yet of the season, and this episode, I don't know, it might rival it. We got a whole lot of details and kind of reveals in this episode, to me, which I'm gonna discuss obviously, but I was kind of mixed on a couple of the reveals that they went with here in this episode, but overall really impressed by this episode, and definitely the second best so far in the season. So anyways, as always guys, love to hear your thoughts of the episode, and also maybe some of your theories going forward, especially due to the couple big reveals that we got in this episode. Maybe your theories then going forward in the season. Love to hear those. I'd love to discuss with you guys and kind of interact here as well over this show. So, yeah, anyways, that's pretty much it. If you liked the video, of course, please leave a like, consider subscribing. I do really like to thank you guys for the support on these reviews. It's been really awesome so far. So, anyways, let's get into it. So, Season 3, Episode 5, If You Have Ghosts, I believe is the title. And, yeah, so, of course, we'll go through a recap here. Then I'll get to my favorite character, my rating, and then some more overall thoughts and my theories as to what we might see going forward here in the season. So, I think we can all agree now that Season 3 is officially better than Season 2. Right? I don't know. Maybe some people already established that, but I think right now, especially after this good episode, I think we can say that now. Anyways, let's get into it. So, we start off here in the 1990s. A lot of focus on the 90s in this episode, and a lot of focus on the 2015. Less focus than paid attention to, but in the 80s. And that's kind of the trend we're going to, right? We're kind of jumping timelines, but each episode we've kind of, gradually been fading the 80s, and then, picking up the 90s, and slowly progressing into the 2015 timeline there, and this one's just kind of furthering that progression, right? So 1990s, West and Hayes are going over the evidence now on their big bulletin board there in the office, and now that evidence includes the image of Julie at the grocery store, right? Where they found her fingerprints that were found on the shelf at the grocery store, right? And so anyways, of course, we saw Hayes get the picture of her there on the camera. I believe that was the ending of last episode. And so, yeah, I mean, they're finally piecing together some stuff. They got her face on there. Of course, the technology is not the same as today, so those facial recognition systems were not quite up to par, or maybe, I mean, and definitely for some departments probably didn't even exist, right? And so for them to get this picture, it's helpful, but it's not going to solve the case all in itself. So then we see the picture of the aftermath of that explosion at Woodard's place, and we see this picture of the explosion there on the bulletin board that's kind of placed right where Hayes is looking, right? And right as Hayes kind of looks at this picture, we see him look at it, we look at it, and then all of a sudden that memory is kind of triggered in Hayes' mind, and that is then how they tell us the story of how the episode ended off last week with the huge, kind of cliffhanger. We heard the explosion, but we didn't see the aftermath of what happened there at Woodard's place. Of course, we start off right where we ended pretty much, is the man kicks down the door, the bomb detonates, which we already saw or we already heard, but then we see that it sends every man to the ground, definitely kills the guy who was kicking down the door, and possibly kills a couple other guys that were really close to the detonation there on the porch, right? So, huge kind of bloodshed already, really ugly looking scene. And then, to make things, even worse, escalating things, is Woodard then cracks the window. He breaks his own window and then just opens fire on everybody with his automatic rifle, it looked like. And he killed multiple men, including one of the cops that was there on the scene, who came. He got shot in the head by Woodard. Of course, we do know his background was from, Vietnam. He was a war veteran. So, he knows how to use this rifle, and he's probably going to have pretty damn good accuracy, as we saw in this scene. And so he actually, kills multiple men, including this cop, and just not a good environment right now. And obviously, Hayes and West had just showed up, right? And so they obviously are going to try to subdue Woodard here in this situation. And to be honest, I mean, those two are really the only ones that are kind of able to survive the initial kind of onslaught from Woodard's gun there, as they're kind of hidden behind the car, right? They're not in the open. And so then Hayes and West try to go around the house to kind of flank him, right? And try to maybe get in towards the back. And that is where a couple of men are running through, and they set off a bomb. It's like a landmine at the side of Woodard's property there. So this bomb goes off, and then kind of chaos ensues. The one man tries to shoot Roland, and he does, shoots him in the leg. Could have been worse, but he shoots him in the leg, and then I think Wayne shoots to kill, shoots the guy down. Anyways, so Roland gets hit in the leg, and then Hayes is now alone, right? So Roland can't walk right now, so he's alone, goes into the house, and he finds Woodard. And the craziest thing here is that Woodard literally has his scope aimed at Roland, at his head, and he can shoot him. Like, he was just about to shoot Roland there before Wayne comes in, and possibly even saves Roland's life, right? We don't know if he was going to pull the trigger necessarily, but possibly saving Roland's life there. So he comes in, he tries talking to him. Wayne tries talking to him, kind of talking him down, saying that we'll go through the process. You're a war veteran, right? So you're gonna, maybe some leniency here with what happens, and, trying to help him out, right? And Woodard, he's just not having it, right? He basically, Woodard just wants to be killed, right? He doesn't want to go through this process. He doesn't want to, go through the court and all that stuff. He just wants to be killed there and then. And Hayes is refusing. He doesn't want to kill Woodard, right? But he basically makes Hayes shoot him in the back of the head. And Hayes actually does it. Woodard's counting down, and then he's about to turn to Hayes. And Hayes is essentially forced to kill him out of self-defense, right? I don't know if Woodard actually would have shot him, but it is what it is. And so he, shoots him in the head and kills Woodard there, right there in the window there in the room. So finally subdues the shooter, right? I think a couple men were left, but I mean, Woodard took out quite a few men. I don't think we got the exact number, but quite a few guys, right? So a very important moment though for Hayes moving forward. We see his just initial reaction right after shooting Woodard here in this scene, and we also see that he's very distraught, and obviously I think this is maybe a first for him, where he's witnessed something like this and also had to do an act such as he did in this scene here, in shooting Woodard and killing him. So then after that scene, we skip to then Tom doing a press conference. So Tom Purcell doing a little bit of a press conference here, making his statement about Julie still being out there, right? So again, we're still in the 90s here. We quickly flash back to the 80s, but we're back to the 90s here after that big scene for Wayne there. And so Tom's doing this press conference. I guess the cops are the ones who kind of put it on and want him to do it. They want him to make this statement for Julie, if she's still out there, she's watching. And so, essentially, he talks to Julie, actually, and says, if you're watching this, call us or whatever. And then he also pleads for other people to call in tips, right? And about it, there'll be rewards and all that stuff. So, basically, just preaching the same sentiment that the feds are pretty much at this point, or the detectives, right, are preaching, in that they want tips and they want to eventually try to find Julie, right? So then as he's leaving, a reporter asks about the conviction of Woodard and if it was right, if it was if he was actually the right guy who killed Julie Purcell, Will Purcell, his son, and then also is maybe the reason for Julie's missing. So this was a huge reveal that came out of nowhere. I mean, obviously we see the scene with Woodard, right? We know it has significance. They wouldn't show us otherwise, but I didn't put two and two together there, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, they got Woodard on it, right? Like, damn. So that was a big reveal that kind of came out of nowhere for me. Maybe I'm just kind of stupid and I didn't, piece things together there. But that was a big reveal for me. So the 80s case was resolved that Woodard was the one who killed Will and also was involved in the kidnapping, well, both, but also then of Julie, in that she's missing. So that is what happened, right? So then the Attorney General gets on the stand after Tom leaves there, basically reaffirms the conclusion they came to, that that Woodard was guilty, right? That there shouldn't be a question of his guilt. And of course, that's the whole motive here for pushing this with the reopening of the case. And then suddenly, the defense lawyer for Woodard, who we've already seen before in the deposition scenes with Hayes and West, he comes up. He just shows up out of nowhere. He shows up with a couple of family members, I think his daughter and Woodard's son. And basically says that they want his name cleared, right? He wants his name cleared and that his posthumous conviction was fraudulent and a dereliction of duty on the part of the prosecution office. So that is what he says. Obviously bold statement to make. The reporters then kind of all converge on this defense lawyer and the two family members, of course. Really just manipulating the situation, kind of comes out of nowhere here. And really manipulates the situation, pushing that constant, kind of theme of maybe they didn't find the right guy, right? And that's kind of what we've been playing on. And so now we finally find out who they got and what the reason now is for him, being wrongly convicted in the eyes of his defense lawyer. So anyways, kind of a cool scene there. Again, a big reveal in that scene, and then also a little bit of a follow-up as well. So then back in 2015, we're switching timelines, of course, as always with this one. And the interviewer girl, so they're back doing the interview after we saw Wayne go visit her hotel room. She gave him a couple clues there in that scene. And so now they've, he agreed now to have her back. And so then she asks if he knew about the cop who processed Woodard's case, who went missing in the 90s. So he was, and we actually saw him then in a later scene about him discovering the backpack and him being the one who was processing that stuff. And then he went missing. So again, another thing that Wayne, and he tells her no, right? I didn't know that. But the funny thing is we recognize his face, right? We recognize his face from before, and that we've seen him, but Wayne says no. So obviously Wayne just probably is not remembering him, right? And the memory is playing a part in this as well. So then she says, a lot of people around this case are dead, which I thought was a key line, definitely a significant one going forward, where we are probably going to learn of a lot more deceased people around this case, and probably that has something to do with covering it up, right? And then so Wayne answers, people do that, miss, right? People do die. Most people I ever knew are gone. And I believe this in this scene, he's kind of making the statement a little bit referring to Roland, as he thinks, or at least, probably believes that Roland is dead at this point. Obviously, later in the episode, he goes and meets him, and obviously he's alive. But at this point, with his memory, I think that's what he was kind of referring to in that line, and not making a big deal about everyone is dead. That would work the case pretty much except for Wayne and Roland. And so again, does that mean that they kind of, that they kind of conformed with what the Attorney General's office was pushing on them in the 90s? Is that the reason that they're still alive? So that's interesting too. Then we get a little bit of relationship stuff here, and yeah, so of course that interview kind of comes back a little bit later in the episode as well, but just was an important part there. So relationship stuff. Wayne and Amelia go to Roland's house for dinner, and we see his girlfriend. They meet him, and then also we meet her at the same time, right? And she's the one, of course, from the church back in 80, that funny little scene. I don't think I talked about it in the recap, but just a little funny scene there with him talking to this girl, the stranger girl, and of course they're together, right? Their girlfriend and boyfriend here, not married yet, and that's a little bit of a controversial discussion for them at this point. But anyway, so Amelia and Wayne, basically come to dinner at their house. So Amelia brings up the case then at the table while they're eating, and Wayne just immediately is upset, right? He's just, not having it, kind of gets angry even at this point a little bit. He does not want to talk about it, but Amelia, I think, kind of knows that too, and so she keeps at it, right? And this is also an opportunity for her to get details about it with Roland being there, right? Roland doesn't quite feel the same way that Wayne does, and so maybe then she'll get some details. Wayne, he's just trying to change the subject at this point, and ultimately, this whole kind of scene is really, demonstrating that the relationship is clearly on the rocks at this point, right? which then later we see that the kids are perhaps the connection that has kept them together or will keep them together for a little bit longer. And so that's what I felt like that next scene was when they got home and they put the kids to bed. I felt like that was really establishing that connection, which would end up being the sole factor for them staying together, as this relationship just looked very, very murky at this point in time. We even get Wayne said, Jesus, you don't quit. Right, and Amelia actually walks off from the table, of course, in front of Roland and the girlfriend. So it's kind of building a lot of, kind of tension here in this scene. I did like the scene for sure. But yeah, so just obviously demonstrating the relationship on the rocks. We already saw a little bit about this last episode, or 2 episodes ago, I should say, in episode 3. And so, of course, we know how that plays in. And again, I would argue that the kids are perhaps the ones who keep them together, as I do think they were still together by the time she passed. And she obviously is dead now in 2015 in the timeline. So anyways, then we see that Hayes is pacing around at the hospital. So we're back to the 80s now, right after Roland got shot. He's given his statement then to the detectives about what happened. Of course, he's got to give a statement right after he shot Woodard and subdued him. And obviously they got to get a statement and all that. Probably not the same process as it is now. Probably a way more in-depth process now. They'd have multiple detectives. But I did like in this scene where he had to give multiple statements. He had to go over and over it again to make sure you had, a correct statement, a consistent statement. And so that I feel would be pretty similar to what would happen now. So anyways, Roland is in surgery for his leg, and essentially the doctor actually comes out, he says he'll be fine, because Wayne was kind of worried that he might lose his leg or something like that, but the doctor says he should be fine. So then at this point, Amelia shows up, and of course this is in the 80s, right? So Amelia shows up, starts to comfort him a little, make him feel a little bit better, ultimately kind of just distract him from what's all going on here, which is complete chaos for him after he just shot this guy, right? And so anyways, so then from the hospital they go back to her place and sleep together, and so I really felt like this scene kind of directly after the 90s scene was really contrasting perhaps the start of their love and the end of their love at this point. So I really like that, and I felt like that's kind of where they were going with those two scenes, kind of back to back with each other there. Yeah, perhaps maybe that scene right there at Roland's house for dinner was the beginning of the end for their relationship, and perhaps this scene at the hospital where they go to sleep together for the first time is the beginning. So I did feel like those really did correlate well there. So then we see that this was a huge realization here. I love this whole sequence here. So Hayes goes to find the record of the unknown prince from the toys in the 80s. So this was an interesting development, right? So him and Roland are kind of checking all the boxes, right? Thinking back to the 80s, thinking about all the proof that they, collected back then, and thinking, well, technology has advanced, I'm sure that we'll find the prince and we'll be able to get more from them. But turns out they're not there anymore, and the logs are essentially useless since they were tracked in back in 10 years ago, right back in the 80s. The logs are kind of useless. The prints aren't there. So a lot of inconsistencies here. Perhaps maybe the guy is telling the truth. Maybe the clerk's telling the truth, right? Maybe they were just kind of lost. It's been 10 years. Or were they covered up and kind of, destroyed at the time? It's hard to tell, right? So it seems like he's getting very frustrated at this point, Wayne. He's not really finding any solutions, especially Roland and him not, working together very well at this point. Hayes kind of having a different perspective on things and a different way of doing things here so far. So anyways, then he sits down and looks at the bulletin board back in the office. This was perhaps the biggest realization of the season so far. This was awesome. So he sees the picture of the red backpack on the wall that was found under Woodard's porch by a detective taking pictures. Again, we see this scene then back playing on to us, and of course Wayne is kind of remembering this. Of course, this backpack was Will's backpack. It even says his name on the backpack, and so very interesting stuff. So like, okay, they found his backpack there. But then Hayes grabs the picture. He says, "Motherfucker," right? This was the moment of truth. Like, he really just realized everything that had happened in this one moment, and the words motherfucker summarize the whole thing, right? So then he goes to Roland's office in a hurry, right? He says that the backpack was planted there, and not only just the backpack, but also the shirt that they found, which were possibly the two biggest evidence pieces at the time that convicted Woodard, right? So, oh damn, right? He says it doesn't look affected by the bomb's damage at all. It looks in perfect condition. He's totally right about that. It does. And then he says they had plenty of time to put it there, right? He says the shirt was also planted there to frame the girl's death, because it would have been better to just have her die instead of her still missing and out there. So to have the shirt there and kind of burned up a little bit, causing people to think that she would be dead, right? And that Woodard killed her there, right? And so that's why the shirt looks a little burnt up, right? But the backpack, again, I mean, that's such good evidence, right? It looks completely not affected. I mean, it looks perfectly fine. So then he says when the shooting happened, somebody saw an opportunity and must have placed those two items there. Roland says at this point, which is something I totally agree with, he says, he doesn't know what to do with this, right? Because they can't go to the attorney general with it, right? I mean, that's not really an option, especially after he just told them their sole orders are to basically prove the conviction again, right? And so they will just be shut down if they go to the attorney general's office, and also they'd be giving away perhaps their two biggest pieces of proof for their case that they're trying to make that Woodard was falsely accused. So a really tough position they put themselves in, but a huge realization here that the backpack and the shirt, both key evidence pieces in the Woodard case, are probably planted. And Hayes realizes this in this moment. So then the biggest scene of the whole episode here, Roland gets a call while Hayes is still in his office at this point, and a man tells him that they got a tip from someone and that they gotta listen to it. So this was an insane scene. I'm going to talk about it, and then I still have some reservations of this one. We see that they call down Tom Purcell, right? They call down Mr. Purcell to an interrogation room so that he can listen to it as well. Obviously, we get the notion that they've already listened to it, right? And that Tom has to listen to this, right? He's affected by this greatly. So he comes in, listens to it. The recording is a woman who tells the man that she saw him, which is Tom, right? That she saw him on the TV, and that she wants him to be kept away from her, right? She doesn't want to have anything to do with that man. And then, of course, the man asks her on the phone, is this Julie Purcell, right? And says Julie Purcell is not her real name, and also says she knows what he did, right? Knows what her dad did, knows what Tom Purcell did. And she says the man on the TV is acting like my father. And then she asks where her brother is and what he did with him. So the whole call is positioned here that Tom is pretending to be like her father. He did the crimes, and she knows it, right? She wants to be kept away from him because he's the one who did it. A huge, huge flip of the situation here, right? And so then she says that the man on the line works for them and that she wants to be left alone. That's it, right? She just wants to be left alone. She doesn't want to give any more details to this guy, and that she thinks that they're all just kind of working for, the police, right? And that Tom Purcell is obviously guilty. He's the guy who did this, and he is pretending to be her dad. Perhaps he's not even their real dad. So then she says, he took me and I'm never coming back. And then she hangs up. So, I mean, holy shit, right? This changes the whole narrative, just flips it completely upside down at this point, placing all the blame in Tom. And at this point in the interrogation room, you see Tom completely broken down. He's in tears, right? Asking Roland if that was her. I mean, that's his first response. Is that her, right? Is that my Julie? And neither Roland or Hayes answer. Do they believe the call? I think that's what happened in this scene. So I'm still kind of wondering at this point. Maybe you guys can fill me in as well if you caught some that I didn't. But I think they believe this call. I don't know how you can prove it, though, because you can't prove that that's Julie. Even if it is, she could be lying and kind of, obviously painting a Tom in a false picture. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they do truly believe it, but why wouldn't they answer Tom? Why would they give him that stern look like he was guilty if they didn't believe him or if they didn't believe the call? So, to me, that scene, crazy scene, but do they believe the call and do they then punish him? And the bigger question is, did Tom then go to prison in the 90s for the crime? Was that call enough then to put him in prison rather than Woodard and clear his name? I hope we find all of that out next episode, and I feel like we will. But anyways, a big scene there. Then to end off the episode here was 2015. Henry tracks down Roland, basically now in 2015. He tracks him down for Wayne, of course, who wants to speak to him, mainly to fill in spots of his memory that are missing, right? So Wayne then, Henry, of course, is his son. Wayne and him go then to visit Roland. Henry tells Roland in advance that things are a little shaky for Wayne right now. And so Roland then also tells him that he's pissed at him since the last time they met. Obviously, Wayne does not remember this, and so it makes for a very awkward, really uneasy conversation here throughout this scene between Roland and Wayne, because Roland was pissed at him and Wayne's just acting like everything's normal. And so obviously it's due to his memory, right, or lack thereof. So, this was great. One of the best scenes of the episode. The two have a conversation then out on Roland's deck. The visuals, the environment, this whole scene was really great. So, anyways, Hayes tells him then about his realization that back in 80, Lucy wrote the ransom note, right, to make Tom feel better as she had to as she let go way before him, which is an interesting one. Of course, he then, earlier in the episode, read Amelia's book and heard the line from Lucy in that book, and of course that one matched pretty much the exact note, word for word there with that line, and so he pieced things together that Lucy was the one who wrote that note, which is very interesting, right? So then Roland says they already knew she had some connection to the guy Hayes just said. Again, they're kind of dancing around here, but I think they're referring to Tom. Then Wayne tells Roland that he came to see him a day after what happened. Again, so the man, right? I think it's Tom. Then Hayes says he really can't remember what exactly happened, and again, playing back to this reason of why he's there, why he's talking to Roland to piece things back together. Roland says he walked away back then. Not this time, says Wayne. So that's the main reason that he's pissed at him, right? Is that Wayne walked away back in 90 and just kind of left him. Didn't, get in contact with him or anything. But Wayne says, not this time, right? So then Roland questions him, is that why you're here now, right, just to talk about the case? Roland's not really interested in that, right? Of course, he's still pissed at him. So he says they shouldn't have split up 25 years ago. He's still upset that Hayes has never called or stopped by. But of course, then we see slowly in the scene that Wayne says he doesn't remember. He truly does not remember and apologizes to him. Roland a little skeptical at first, but I think eventually he gets it. He understands that Wayne truly just does not remember, and that is why perhaps they have not connected in the last 25 years. And so then Wayne, one of the more emotional lines in this episode is that he says he can't remember his life, which is a very unfortunate reality at this point for Wayne. So Roland, obviously recognizing that and kind of eases up at this moment, especially after that line about remembering his life. So Roland then, I guess, feels for him a little bit, but still doesn't want to discuss the case, right? He feels for Wayne now. He kind of forgives him, but he still doesn't want to discuss this case, and that's all that Wayne wants to do, of course. So then Wayne says that with the brains he has left, he would like to finish it and finish this case once and for all. And then Roland says, I could use a laugh, right? And then that's the last line, and then they kind of, fade away into the forest environment, little shot there. So, anyways, are they back together in 2015 once again? Awesome stuff, right? We ended the episode 3 off this way, and now it looks like they're back together in the 3rd timeline. So it's going to be awesome. A couple old timers, right? Former detectives trying to maybe work out the final details and find out the real truth about this case once and for all. So a really heartwarming and kind of emotional scene there between the two. All right, so just to wrap things up now, my rating for this episode, I'm going to give it a 4.7 out of 5. I believe I gave last episode a 4.8 out of 5. So, again, very close. The margin's very close here. A lot of reveals, right, in this episode. and I liked them. Two huge reveals, right? That Woodard was convicted in 80, and that Tom Purcell possibly was the one convicted in 90. But again, I'm not totally sure. So the reveals, though, seemed a little lackluster, especially the Woodard one, because I get that we'll probably revisit the Tom Purcell thing next episode. But the Woodard thing, it looks like they mention his name very subtly, right? They mention his name, and then they're kind of sweeping him under the carpet, and now we're moving on. It's like, that's a pretty big deal that they convicted him in 80, and that's just a reveal, a new reveal that happened just now. So for me, I didn't love that, how they kind of just grazed over that and just kept going with the story. I felt like more time should have been paid to that moment that Woodard was revealed as being the one convicted, because this whole time they've been setting it up as, it's still a mystery, right? We don't know yet. And then this episode they reveal it, and it didn't seem too much of a payoff. So I hope that's not a preview of things to come. I don't think so, but that is a little bit something that I might be worried about going forward. So, and then, of course, the Tom one, I mean, again, we'll have to see till next episode. I'm going to wait on that one. Again, establishing another parallel with the third timeline, as I just mentioned. Wayne and Roland getting back together for the third timeline, working together and possibly working on this case. So, you know what? In hindsight, I really do like the timelines, and I love what they've done with them. I do really appreciate what they're trying to do and their methods in doing that as well. Really great job. So then it also looks as though the 80s mystery is now over, but perhaps the 90s is still left, and 2015 has just begun. So those are kind of my closing statements here on this episode. Looks like they've wrapped up the 80s mystery. Of course, we'll still see some scenes, some flashbacks. I presume, right? Especially with Amelia and Wayne, showing that relationship deteriorating even more. But for now, I think the mystery part of the 80s is now over. Now we're into the 90s, kind of wrapping that up slowly. And then 2015 is still left. Of course, we only have 3 more episodes after this. So, yeah, I mean, we're getting to the end. So anyways, really great stuff here going forward. Favorite character for this episode, it's Mahershala Ali. I gotta go with him. Wayne Hayes, of course. Crazy stuff here. I mean, the acting in this episode was superb by Mahershala Ali. It has been every episode, but especially this one. Of course, there was a lot of different timelines with him. I felt like the scene with him and Roland was some of the best acting that either actor has done so far in the season. So that last scene, yeah, it was really amazing. So anyways, Wayne Hayes, obviously the favorite character, and of course we'll have to see then how the 2015 timeline all spans out here, and how him and Roland maybe work together from his porch or whatever, right? So anyways, I think at this point, in terms of my theories, it's an inside job. I'm kind of sold on that. It's got to be the way that these backpack and shirt pieces of evidence were planted. There's got to be something here. Either it was planned from the beginning that it was an inside job, or something did happen and they know the truth, but they're just trying to hide it. But I think it's definitely attributed to an inside job with the cops. The Attorney General may even be guilty at this point. So we'll have to see. But anyways, that's it for me for this review of True Detective Season 3, Episode 5. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. I do really appreciate the support, as I said off the top, for these reviews. Been really awesome. The likes, comments, views, just been really great. So I do really appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully the next 3 episodes, counting this one, I guess. But yeah, the next 3 episodes are looking to be very good. A couple teasers now released for the rest of the season, and it looks really good. So anyways, True Detective Season 3 officially better than Season 2. I'm ready to say it. Anyways, so yeah, again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Of course, playlist with all my reviews. So if you missed a couple earlier ones, please be sure to go check those out as well. But anyways, once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week for True Detective Season 3, Episode 6.